Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 282. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Saturday, August the 27th, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. It's the supply chain, stupid. That's the topic of today's podcast. And I borrowed it from the old Bill Clinton campaign. It's the economy, stupid. Concentrating on one thing and one thing only, because it's the biggest thing, puts you on the straight path to solving problems. You get rid of the ambient noise that's all around if you just focus on one problem. And right now, the problem has to do with the supply chain. Most every problem we have, you can link back to the supply chain. Today's essay talks about what is the supply chain. We've always had supply chains in the world, but they've changed for a variety of reasons. Where we're at, where we were, where we are going, in this broadcaster's opinion, anyway. But anyway, that's what we talk about. And in our interesting changing times, I go into great detail on today's podcast about the supply chain. Before we get into that, though, just one little topic that has absolutely nothing to do with the supply chain. And it has to do with sports. Okay, if you're a baseball fan, I'm not even necessarily a Cardinal baseball fan, but there's many statistics in baseball. The home run leaders, there's the batting average leader, there's the RBI leader, and there's also something called the Triple Crown winner. Now, what is the Triple Crown? It's not a horse racing thing. Well, it is a horse racing thing, but not when it comes to baseball. The Triple Crown is the guy who leads the league in home runs, RBIs, and batting average. It almost never happens. In the American League, I think Miguel Cabrera. Thank you. he won the Triple Crown in I want to say 2012, something like that, and that was the first time since Carl Yastrzemski had won it. I want to say that was 1967. Okay, that was in the American League. In the National League, the last guy to win the Triple Crown, the last guy to lead the league in home runs, RBIs, and batting average, was also a Cardinal, Ducky Medwick, 1937. Okay, that's the last time it's been done in the National League, 1937 by Joe Ducky Medwick. Paul Goldschmidt, Cardinal first baseman, has a real chance at winning the Triple Crown. I haven't looked at the numbers after last night's games, but as of yesterday afternoon, as of Friday, August the 26th afternoon, he was two back of the leader in home runs, led the league in RBIs, and led the league in batting average. He has a legitimate chance to win the Triple Crown. To the best of my knowledge, every player who has won the Triple Crown ever is in the Hall of Fame. So this is something that could be historic. I mean, Goldschmidt's had a wonderful year. He could stumble and fall, and this all could just go by the wayside. Or he could continue doing what he's been doing, and we could have history being made in Major League Baseball. Just something that kind of makes me smile. Maybe it'll make you smile as well, if you're a baseball fan, in particular a Cardinal fan. Today's essay, it's the supply chain, stupid. As I mentioned in the intro, I've stolen this from Bill Clinton on his campaign. It's the economy, stupid, because during Clinton's campaign, he wanted the voters to focus on the economy, what your pocketbook is doing. Okay, so his campaign slogan, and not so much exterior but interior within his working circle of people, was, it's the economy, stupid. Keep everything focused on the economy. And he won and was reelected. He was a two-term president. Okay, so it was successful. The supply chain is the big thing. And the supply chain has always been an issue, okay? Stuff goes up because we have a shortage of whatever, okay? There's a drought. There's a what was it? Several years ago, there was a problem in Florida with the oranges. There was like some disease on the oranges, so orange juice goes through the roof because you have a shortage of the orange juice, okay? Shortage of oranges, shortage of orange juice goes up. Stuff never goes away, but when the supply drops and demand stays high, the price goes up. We see that with gasoline all the time. We see that with a variety of items. And we first started seeing this big time when COVID-19 hit. And I've said this, you can go from item to item to item, and the reason it's happened, COVID. Yeah, okay, COVID, okay. And I get it. It was a real thing, okay? When you shut down a third of the world, you're going to have problems getting stuff, okay? Is COVID gone? No, but in most parts of the world, it's gone from a pandemic to an endemic. People still get sick in this country with COVID-19, but it's more like a cold or the flu. People aren't dying like they used to, okay? So the new variants are less so. At least in the United States, things have opened up. I'd probably say 90%. Okay, there's still some limitations in some places for some items, but for the most part, we've opened up here. The rest of the world the same way. China, not so much. Maybe for whatever reason, they're still staying closed down. Maybe because that's where the virus came from. They know more than we do. Who knows? But for the most part, the COVID problem has waned anyway. I won't say it's gone, but I'll say that it certainly has waned. And we have the global warming issue. Global warming, and this is the whole fact and opinion thing with global warming. Before all you on the right jump on me, said, strong, there's no such thing as global warming. And all you on the left jump my case because, well, you don't understand. We have to stop driving SUVs or we're going to have global warming. Here's the hard facts about global warming. Global warming is real. Now, if you don't believe me, look at the temperature of the world and how it's ticked up. That's the fact. The opinion is, because you and I drive SUVs, that's why global warming has happened. That's an opinion, okay? Some scientists say that's the reason. Some say that's a contributor. Some say it has next to nothing to do with it, okay? So just pick a scientist, okay? But they all agree that we have global warming because the temperature is getting warmer. And because of global warming, things are changing. We're going away from fossil fuels. We're going away from the ICEs, internal combustion engines, and more towards, in theory, cleaner energy sources, okay? And I mean, by the way, I think that's a good thing. Not because it may or may not be contributing to global warming, but because it does definitely contribute to dirty air. If we found a way to generate all of our electricity via clean means and then run our vehicles on electricity instead of fossil fuels, the air would be cleaner, okay? And we're getting there. Now, the argument is, do we need to get there tomorrow and shut down economies? Or do we need to get there within the next 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years and have the economies prosper? I like door number 2, okay? And the funny thing is, well, we have global warming and the seas are going to rise, and that's a problem. Well, it's a problem if you live on the beach, okay? And newsflash, who lives on the beach? Who can afford beachfront property? Not me, and probably not you. And if the oceans rise, that's a bad thing for the guy who lives on the beach. But is it a bad thing for the guy who lives on the property behind the guy who lives on the beach? Translation, he now has beachfront property. See where I'm going there? It just depends on how you look at things. Is it how things are good or how things are bad? Okay? If global warming is a good thing or a bad thing. if it's because we run SUVs or it's because just of the cycle and the climate, because the biggest thing that affects our temperature is the sun that we rotate around, okay? And there's little or nothing we can do about that. Now, global warming is it's a fact, okay? And it does affect things, okay? So that's another way that the supply chain is being affected. One of the biggest reasons we have gasoline prices up in this country, sure, it's oil. WTI, I think Friday closed around $92 a barrel, which is a lot higher than normal, but it's not $130 a barrel, okay? And as oil prices go up, gas prices go up. But the biggest reason the gas prices went up is not because oil is too high, but because gasoline refining capacity has stayed flat for a long time. And a lot of people say, well, why don't they just build more gasoline refineries? Well, California passed a law that starting in 2035, no more cars are going to be allowed in the state. ICE cars, that is. They all have to be renewable cars, renewable energy cars, or hybrids. So that's going to stop demand for gasoline. Now, it takes about 5 years to build a refinery, the way I understand. Why would you, and it's about a 20-year payback, 10 to 20-year payback on a refinery. Why would an oil company want to expand their capacity on a product that the government is not going to allow them to sell in the future? See where I'm going there? I understand that we have that problem, but it's not all oil prices, because we don't run our cars on oil. We run our cars on gasoline, which is a refined product of oil. See where I'm getting at there? So the bottom line is global warming, the whole global warming issue does affect the supply chain in many ways. Some obvious, some not so obvious. Number 3, the Ukraine-Russian war. And that has affected things big time. Now, again, to all those on the far right or those on the far left who have just, both of you are just off the reservation. Some say it does nothing for the supply chain. Some say it does everything for the supply chain. Well, as usual, the truth is somewhere in between. It has certainly disrupted the supply chain. It's certainly changed a lot of things. It's certainly caused us to have to alter the way we do things. In this country, on this side of the world, sure. But definitely, absolutely definitely in Europe. And I've got a couple of stories, one of them out of the Wall Street Journal, one of them out of another source I'm going to go into later, that just explains how Europe is being affected. And if we're being affected to the nth degree, they're being affected by the nth degree squared or probably cubed. Okay, so we'll go into that a little bit later. But the biggest news this week was President Biden passing, and I'm not going to say passing legislation because it wasn't legislation. I believe it was an executive order for giving $10,000 worth of student loans to those earning under $125,000, or $20,000 if you got it via a Pell Grant, and those making under $250,000 if you're a married couple filing jointly. So that has changed things, okay? That coupled with quiet quitting, okay? I'm quiet quitting. I'm not going to work so hard. And why should I? Because they just forgave my student loan debt. That's something that's just bizarre to me. Now, you can say that if you're one of those people who had your debt forgiven, okay, good for you. You have a windfall. But there's a lot of people out there who don't have student loan debt. And the vast majority of people who have or had student loan debt are paying it back. Now, what about the person who has $100,000 in student loan debt and they got a degree in basket weaving and they work at a restaurant? Okay, it didn't help that person because you still have $90,000 in student loan debt, which you can't pay back anyway. But what that does do is The guy who works in a warehouse making $40,000 a year, congratulations. You get to take some of your tax dollars and pay off the student loan or $10,000 of the student loan for the doctor or lawyer who makes $110,000 a year. Congratulations. Good for you. That's fair. That's good. That's another way that things have changed. And that affects the supply chain as well. So you say to yourself, well, Strong, how does that affect the supply chain? Well, sometimes if you want to find the truth, you can read books, you can have conversations with your buddies, you can do research, or you can talk to a bartender, which is what I did this week. My travels this week took me to Kansas on business, and I stayed in a DoubleTree hotel in Lawrence, Kansas, and I talked to the bartender. Now, as I've mentioned before many times, I like to have my dinner in restaurants at the bar, mainly because the television's close and you got somebody to talk to, the bartender. Sometimes they have time, sometimes they don't. Well, this time they did, because this DoubleTree hotel, which probably has 300 rooms, was at maybe 10% capacity. They said they had 30 rooms that night. This hotel is close to, I don't know if it's University of Kansas or Kansas State. I forget. One of the Kansas universities is right there. There's another college that's right there. And if there's a university type function, the place is full. Well, this part of the week, they had nothing. Now, the weekend was going to be packed, but there was nothing going on, so the hotel was darn near empty. So I sat in the restaurant by myself at the bar talking to the bartender. And you think to yourself, well, what does a bartender in Lawrence, Kansas have anything to do with the supply chain or quiet quitting or loan forgiveness or COVID or global warming? Well, the guy was, I guess he was, 40, mid-30s, early 40s, okay. And actually, when I walked into the restaurant, there was a nice, pretty young lady who greeted me and asked me if I wanted to sit down. I said, I'm going to sit at the bar if that's okay. She said, okay. She sat me down there and got me a glass of water, changed the television to what I wanted to watch, and left. Then she said, the bartender will be right with you. She was the waitress. He was the bartender. She had all the tables, which at that time were none. And he had the bar, which at that time was me. Okay. And the bartender came up, he greeted me, and he said, how's your evening going? And me being the Weisenheimer, I said, well, not so good. He said, because he was just a guy who was a normal looking guy. I said, the lady who sat me down here is a whole lot prettier than you. We laughed about it and we agreed, and that broke the ice. We had a nice conversation. And actually, he said, I'm the acting bartender tonight. I said, so you're not the bartender normally? He says, no. He says, actually, I'm the executive chef here. But tonight I'm the bartender. So after a while, he expanded and said why. And he said, if you need a drink mixed, I'm not sure that I'm real good at mixing drinks, which I just wanted a beer, so we were fine. But he said, yeah, I'm the executive chef. But tonight I'm the bartender. He said, and he was worn out. He looked tired. He said, that's because I've been here since early this morning. He said, doing chef duties. And I was getting ready to go home. And they said, yeah, well, the bartender didn't call in. So we need you to stay until 11 o'clock tonight when the bar closes. Okay. So there he was. He worked from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. that day. That's a 14-hour day. That's a long day, friends. And the reason he was the bartender that night is because the bartender just didn't show up. I said, well, what do you mean he didn't show up? Didn't he call in? He said, well, yeah, he didn't call in, but he texted in to his manager, the food and beverage manager. But the food and beverage manager was on his day off, and he doesn't look at his text messages on his day off. So the executive chef had to call the bartender, and the bartender said, I'm not coming in. I texted my boss. So he calls the boss. Says, well, he might have texted me, but I don't look at my text. This is my day off. And he looked at his text. Oh, yeah, so-and-so. Yeah, he's not coming in. Okay, well, what do we do? Well, we can't shut the bar down because that's not what you do at a restaurant. So the guy worked a double shift, 14-hour day. okay? Because one guy decided to just not come to work, and his boss decided to cancel his responsibility as well. And that's the whole quiet quitting thing. Now, maybe this is an old man thing, but that seems to be how newer generations work. Older generations don't work that way. I'm not saying my generation never took off. I'm not saying that. But back when I worked in the machine shop, if I decided I didn't want to come to work and I just texted my boss and that was it, I would have been fired. Oh, and by the way, if I was the boss, a manager, a responsible member of management, and I said, it's my day off, I don't look at texts, I'd have been fired. But that's not how way things work anymore, okay? And that segues into the whole student loan thing, the whole quiet quitting thing. And that's James Strong Show podcast 281 last week. So if you want to go back to the quiet quitting movement, which isn't all bad. In fact, you can say quiet quitting is getting away from all responsibility, or you can say quiet quitting is not living for your job. Living for your job is not smart. It's not smart. It's not healthy. Okay. So doing what's expected of you, meeting your responsibilities, doing what you're being paid for, and not bringing tons of work home, that's fine. Deciding you're not going to come to work, knowing there's nobody there to take your place, and just texting your boss, that's not fine. And if you're a manager, and if you say, I'm 9 to 5, I'm not accessing my texts when I'm off, that's not fine either. And this segues into that whole student loan forgiveness. Now, I'm going to make a statement here that many of you are going to say, well, Strong, you're just a pompous ass. You're one of the elite who looks down your nose at those who don't have much. Friends, $10,000 is not a whole lot of money. You can believe that or not. But I'm here to tell you, $10,000 is not a whole lot of money. Now, is it a whole lot of money that you have to come up with tomorrow? Sure. Many people, maybe most people, couldn't come up with $10,000 tomorrow. But here's the news flash. Student loan debt is not due tomorrow. In fact, they've kicked that can down the road. If you hadn't wanted to, you haven't had to make a student loan payment for 2 years now. And savings for individuals are up. We've been given all kinds of COVID money. The job market has never been better. I know we have inflation, but wages have never been higher. And $10,000 is not much money when you look at it over 10 years. It's $1,000 a year, okay? And by the way, this isn't something that was just sprung upon you. This was something that you raised your hand and you said, you know what? I agree to borrow this money with the understanding that I'm going to pay it back. So what are people saying now? April Fool? I was crossing my fingers? No, you borrow money, you got to pay it back. And I will ask this question, again, you'll say, well, Strong, you don't understand. Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't understand. But here's what I do understand. There's a lot of people out there who have just had this $10,000 forgiven. And when you combine the booze they drink, the cigarettes they smoke, and the tattoos displayed on their body over a 10-year period, I bet you they spent $10,000 on that. So instead of just having their debt taken and paid by those who never went to college, those who went to college and paid for it out of their own pocket, those who went to college got a student loan and paid it back, they're paying the way for the ones who didn't pay it back. And many of them, you know what? I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to stop smoking cigarettes, and I'm not going to get tattoos for 10 years. And there's my $10,000. Tell me I'm wrong. You can't, because I'm right. And that's what I mean by $10,000 is not a whole lot of money. There's an interesting statistic. This was from several years ago. I assume it's still true. If it's not true, it's probably real close to being true. But the average student, and I'm going off of rough figures here, but the average student, when they quit college, first thing they do, buy a car. That's the biggest purchase that the first college graduate buys is a car. And the average price of the average car is like $32,000. The average of the students who have student loan debt, who take money out, the average student loan note that they have is $32,000. So the average student loan debt for the college graduate is almost identical to the price of a new car. So I've asked this question many times. How many people with student loans went out after college and bought a new car? I bet they paid for that. They paid for it or they got it repossessed. Now, you can't repossess a college degree, of course, nor should you. But if you can afford a new car, why can't you afford the student loan? That, again, is how things have changed. If you borrow money, you're expected to pay it back. Now, the argument that was made, and it's not a wrong argument either, is these were predatory lenders. This whole student loan thing was done in a predatory manner, which I don't disagree with. But here's my problem with the federal government forgiving student loans. Who made the rules that cause student loans to be predatory? The federal government. Have those rules changed? No. So are student loans still predatory? Yes. But the loans are forgiven now. I wasn't against doing something to forgive student loan debt if the system was fixed so that it's no longer predatory. How could you make it predatory? Come on, Strong, what do you do? How could you make student loan debt not predatory? Well, how about this? The federal government doesn't back a student loan anymore. You got to go through a bank. You think the bank is going to make a bad loan? Nope. And they're going to expect you to pay it back too. And they're only going to loan you so much money. So you may not be able to go to Vassar for $125,000 to get a degree in women's studies. No one's going to loan you that money. But you may be able to go to Missouri S&T, borrow $50,000 and get an engineering degree. Oh, and by the way, because you borrow that money from a bank, you're going to have to pay it back. But what if you just can't? What if something happens and you can't pay that back? Well, if your debt's too big, what do you do in this country? You file bankruptcy. That's how the law works. Except for the federal government doesn't allow you to file bankruptcy against a student loan. Isn't that interesting? You don't have to pay back the doctors or the lawyers or the car companies or your mortgage company or your credit card company. You can file bankruptcy and just wash all that away if things get out of hand. But you can't wash away a student loan debt because Uncle Sugar backs that. And in that respect, it is a predatory loan. And in that respect, something needs to be done to stop it. But nothing's been done to stop it. We just smile and say, don't worry, snowflake, you don't have to pay your loan back. That's just wrong. But that's how things have changed. Things have just changed that way. And the whole workforce, the whole way that we approach our jobs and what we do for a living has changed. And once upon a time, the biggest companies were manufacturers. Now they're not. They're software companies. They're Facebook, they're Google, they're Apple, which I guess they're a manufacturing company, kind of. But those are the big companies now. And they're ran by really smart people much more intelligent than me. And I'm in the process of listening to an interview on Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is interviewing Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook. What do they call it? Meta something or another now. It's Facebook, okay? And it's an interesting interview. Mark Zuckerberg is a very brilliant individual. You may or may not like what he stands for. You may or may not like his politics, but you cannot deny he's a brilliant individual, okay? And he and Rogan were talking about something that just went way over my head. And not only did I not understand, but even in my wildest imagination, I cannot conceive. Part A, I could not conceive. Part B, Zuckerberg was just wrong with a capital W, okay? And it had to do with something that Facebook is rolling out called augmented reality. Now, what is augmented reality? Well, it's not virtual reality. It's kind of reality, okay? And the example they used as to how augmented reality is, and they opened the show with this, was Zuckerberg and Rogan were playing with this headset where you have augmented reality, where you can just go ahead and if you're working from home, but you can kind of all be in a room with all your coworkers virtually. So you're all going to a virtual office, even though you're all working from home. You have the augmented reality headsets on, and what you do is you set up an avatar of yourself and you go to work. Now, here's the two strange things about this. One of them is bizarre that I don't understand. The other one is just flat out wrong. Zuckerberg said, here, my avatar is an alien gray, a female alien gray, and that's what I log into work as. So he's in a room with other people doing work virtually, but his avatar is a female alien gray. I'm sorry, but how can you do work that way? If you want to have a conversation with friends, play video games, do something else like that, and you want to go ahead and have an avatar like that, I think it's fine. I think it's funny. I think it's humorous. I think it's creative. But to show up for work like that? Friends, if I'm in a augmented reality situation where I've logged into a workspace and I'm working with a whole bunch of people virtually, and the guy or gal I'm working with, their avatar is an alien gray, there is no way on God's green earth I will take that individual even halfway seriously. How can you? How can you do that? And that's what I don't get. Now, where Zuckerberg was 100% wrong, 1,000% wrong, and shame on Joe Rogan for not calling him on it, because maybe he didn't think about it. Maybe he didn't want to alienate Zuckerberg for bigger questions down the road. I don't know why Rogan didn't challenge him, but Zuckerberg said, you know what? We're coming to a time where everybody will be working from home. Nobody will have to show up for work anymore. 100% of us, all of us, will be working from home. That's just wrong. 100% of us will never work from home. 100% of people who look at a computer screen may perhaps work at home one day, because you can look at a computer screen from anywhere. But what if you put boxes away at a warehouse? What if you load trucks? What if you drive trucks? What if you manufacture widgets for automobiles? What if you put together automobiles? What if you, see where I'm getting there? What if you serve food at a restaurant? What if you're a bartender who's supposed to show up for work? Those people are never going to be able to work from home. So for Zuckerberg to make the outrageous statement of saying, well, we'll all work from home one day. Well, who's going to make the hardware for your stuff? We'll just buy that from China. I bet that's what he's thinking. And when you have something like that, when you have somebody who's very bright, very smart, who makes just dopey, stupid statements like Zuckerberg made, and don't take my word for it, listen to the interview. I'm about halfway through. It's a 3-hour interview, which, by the way, that's how Joe Rogan gets all these people, is he gives them the floor for 3 hours. Okay? Listen to the interview and see if I'm wrong. I'm not. He really does say everybody will be working from home. I don't know if it's an elitist thing or if they think that everybody work just means looking at a computer screen. I don't know. But again, that's how things have changed. That's how the supply chain changes. Because many people say, well, I don't want to show up for work. I've got a college degree. There's no way I'm going to pour drinks. There's no way I'm going to wait tables. There's no way I'm going to load trucks. There's no way I'm going to deliver items. Well, friend, if that's all you can do because you got debts and bills to pay, you need to get off your tookish and get a job doing that. Now, in the meantime, keep looking for what you want to do, with the understanding that you may never get paid what you think you're going to get paid. Teachers get paid X. Firemen get paid X. Policemen get paid X. Ball players make a whole lot more money. Teachers, firemen, policemen are never going to be paid like ball players, okay? You want to make the big money? Be a ball player. Don't be a teacher. Don't be a policeman. Don't be a fireman, all right? That's just what it is. But it all has to do with the supply chain, because there's a large number of people who just won't do certain jobs. And why should they? If you're forgiving their student loan debt, there's no need. There's a supply and demand right there. If they don't have the bills to pay, why go to work? The only reason we go to work is to make the money. If you don't need to make the money, why would you go to work? But if you think we have supply chain problems in this country, look at what they have in Europe. Europe has a huge supply chain problem, okay? Just a huge supply chain problem. Case in point, in Europe, European businesses as diverse as car makers, bottle manufacturers, skyscraper builders, not to mention the artistic glass blowers, are having a big problem because there's going to be a shortage of glass in Europe. Well, what do you mean, Strong? A shortage of glass? Yeah. How do you think glass is made? It's heated with natural gas. And as Moscow reduces the natural gas exports to Europe, European governments have made contingency plans to encourage conservation and ration gas amongst the most energy-intensive industries, and among them, glass production. Because to make glass, you have to melt sand, soda ash, and limestone. Melt them. Melt sand, okay? That takes a lot of energy. It's done with natural gas, and the natural gas largely comes from Russia. Now, glass is used for many items in manufacturing. Windows, car windshields, computer and smartphone screens, bottles that hold medicine, soft drinks, beer, liquor. And some business executives and industry analysts fear a serious shortage could result in another supply chain disruption, okay, because of no glass. In fact, Russia's shutting off the gas for Germany would cause a new parts shortage problem. That's according to Xia Pei. He's the head of strategic manufacturing at luxury car maker Audi. He says, we're just not going to be able to make glass for cars. They're trying to stockpile it, getting them from other places. In fact, Western leaders all over are preparing for the possibility that Russian natural gas flows through the key Nord Stream pipeline may never, ever return to full levels. Ever. Now, what's that going to do? Well, Volkswagen, who makes Audis and Porsches, said it's increasing its inventory of components that use glass, like windows, windshields, and tapping suppliers outside Europe not affected by the gas crisis. Even the European beer industry is feeling the pressure. Some bottle suppliers, including at least 2 that operate in the Ukraine, were forced to close plants. Yeah, how would you like to be that? Okay, we make beer, and we get our beer bottles from Ukraine. Not anymore, you don't. Now, the cost of glass has gone up 90%. German beer makers, they're going to say, look, we're going to have to raise our prices if we have beer bottles at all. Now, for glass makers, the pressure of gas supply uncertainty is compounded to the fact that, okay, well, we can't just shut down the furnace, because you can't just turn it off, because molten glass, if you turn off the furnace, it cools, it hardens, and it breaks the equipment. So once you turn the furnace on, you can't turn it off. If you do, you're throwing away the furnace because it's scrap. Now, on the Venetian island of Murano, which has been a glass-making hub since the 13th century, glass blowers have stopped making vases and chandeliers. In fact, because their gas prices in that island have risen 900% in the past year. They can't operate anymore and make money. Larger manufacturers are also considering transferring part of their production to regions where natural gas prices are lower. Schott AG, they're a big German specialty glass maker. They're investing 400 million euros in a new plant in Turkey. Turkey doesn't have a big natural gas problem because they're kind of buddy-buddy with Putin. Now, the expansion makes it possible to ensure the long-term production of pharmaceutical glass for the German and European Pharmaceutical Agency if they build that plant in Turkey. Okay? Some glass makers are shifting from gas to oil or diesel. Since Russia invaded Ukraine this spring, IO Glass, they're actually out of Perrysburg, Ohio, which is just south of Detroit. They make bottles and jars in 34 factories in the EU. They've converted about 20% of their furnaces to run on oil. So they're trying to do things differently. If you think we have a problem here, the Europeans have a huge problem, and an unbelievably huge problem. Now, all problems can be solved. They always have been. I mean, remember the old story back in the 1850s. They said if the population keeps increasing, that by the year 1930, the city of St. Louis would be so full of horse poop that people couldn't live. Well, that didn't happen because people stopped riding horses in St. Louis for the most part, okay? But there's always a solution to the problem. In fact, one of those solutions to that problem, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz promised in February, way back in February, to overhaul his country in response to the invasion of the Ukraine. Now, 6 months after Seinwende, that's turning point in German, things are going better than they thought. In fact, Mr. Scholz announced 3 transformations in his startling speech to lawmakers on February 17th. That was 3 days after Putin's invasion started, just 3 days after the invasion. First, Berlin said they would reinvest in their military to meet NATO's goal of spending 2% gross domestic product on defense, okay? Mainly upgrading their fighter jets to keep air superiority. Second, Germany would treat energy policy as a national security manager and wean itself off of Russian natural gas. Third, Berlin no longer would pursue mindless diplomacy for diplomacy's sake, especially with the world's autocrats like Putin. Now, as substantial as those pledges were, enacting them would have required a much larger shift in the German public, business, and political culture. Building voter support for such radical changes necessitates a wholesale reappraisal of Germany's interests and its role in the world. Surprisingly, or not, Germany is doing well with it. The most important development is something that hasn't yet occurred. Skyrocketing energy prices as a result of Russia's energy's blackmail and the prospect of a cold, dark winter aren't inducing Germans to ask if the fuss over the Ukraine is worth it. In fact, over 70% of respondents to a poll say, you know what, we need to continue to back the Ukraine. So Putin thought the Germans would fold. They haven't. Now, the catalyzing moment was with the release in early April of the stomach-turning photographs depicting Russian atrocities in the town of Bucha. Now, the arrival of war on European soil, followed by graphic evidence of the conflict's brutality, appears to have stirred German voters to make new, cost-effective calculations about their role in the world. Now, as part of that, Germany seems to be seriously reevaluating how it weighs its commercial interests. Energy dependence on Russia isn't half of it. Fuel aside, Germany's commercial relationship with Russia isn't really substantial. Imposing sanctions on Moscow still hurt Germany economically, but only at $26 billion last year. In fact, Germany doesn't export any more to Russia than they do to Sweden, a tiny country. The bigger question involves China. Are they going to do the same thing with China? Because that's an autocratic government as well. Now, for decades, Germany has viewed trade as a diplomatic tool under the change through trade mantra. Increasingly, however, there's an awareness that trade can become a strategic vulnerability if companies and politicians are careless, and they have. However, Germany is making headroads into actually solving this problem. They're stockpiling natural gas. They're going to cut back on natural gas. It looks like they're going to have enough natural gas, so they're not going to have to ration this winter unless they have a unbelievably cold winter, which with global warming, of course, that won't happen, right? But Germany is actually doing something. And I bring that up because, sure, Germany is what? It's 60 million people, whereas we have about 360 million in this country. So it's a much smaller country. But they've been able to do it under a lot of pain. If they can do it, we can do it, right? Now, an epilogue to this whole thing. Changing times means new opportunities, okay? Now, what does that mean? Because we have supply chain problems, because we had COVID, because we have global warming, because we have the Ukraine-Russian war, that doesn't mean that the business cycle just stops. Business doesn't stop because goods are harder to obtain. Supply chain and demands are a constant. You're always going to have demand. That demand changes. And if the supply chain to meet that demand changes, two things happen. Either demand drops or supply changes. You change the way you do things, okay? That always happens. Me personally, in my personal world, in my business, I've gotten phone calls in the last week or two from the Philippines, Indonesia, Europe, and many U.S. companies who use European suppliers. They say, look, we can't get our stuff. Can you help us out? And we don't have any other problems here that we have in Europe. So the answer is, yeah, we can help you out. So it's a business opportunity. Now, I mentioned this in bringing everything together here with the reason for this essay. There's new opportunities out there because things are changing, because of COVID, because of global warming, because of the Russian-Ukraine war, because of the supply chain disruption, which, by the way, is going to get worse. It's going to get worse. But there's a way around it. There's always a workaround. Always a workaround, okay? And I say that because there's opportunity for each and every one of you out there. Now is not the time for quiet quitting. Again, James Strong Show, podcast 281. Look it up, listen to it. Now's not the time for quiet quitting. Now's not the time to just go ahead and roll up in a ball and say, okay, Mr. Biden, pay my other debts too. If you look out there at the opportunities that we have unbelievable opportunities in this country, in this world. I would say now is maybe the best time in years that we've had for new opportunities. Now, does that mean that I'm advocating just put on a augmented reality headset, turn your avatar into an alien gray, and then go to work that way? No. If restaurants are having trouble with bartenders, you could be a bartender. If you need more money, here's a news flash. Get a second job. There's no rule that says you can work no more than 40 hours a week. Get a second job and make more money. Or get a first job and make more money, okay? There's so many opportunities out there. We have so many people who aren't working. And maybe, just maybe, if you look at this supply chain disruption, see how you can go ahead and enter yourself into the equation and make extra money. Maybe, just maybe, you can put together an extra $1,000 a year to pay off your $10,000 loan. Because, dear listeners, here's the dirty little secret. $10,000 in the big scheme of things in your life earning potential is a drop in the bucket. It's not much. However, I will say this. If you've constantly got your hand out, waiting for the next handout, If you're constantly waiting, well, why should I do this or that? Because I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that. Okay, you'll get the little spiff. You'll get the crumb falling from Uncle Sugar's table. But now you've missed a lot of time. You've missed a lot of opportunities. How many opportunities have you missed because you're waiting for the next handout? Take the bull by the horns. See how you can optimize these opportunities and do it. You'll be a better man or woman for the effort. That's it. We're done. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's the email address. You want to get this email each and every time when you open up your email. After I publish a podcast, I will send you that email link. You can click on it, download it, and listen to it at your leisure. Or pick it up wherever you get your podcasts. Many places. Just Google James Strong Show and click on it, and life is good. And share the podcast. I was talking to my buddy Jerome, and he says he shares the podcast with 30 different people. Thank you, Jerome. I appreciate that. And if you'll share my podcast with other people, I would appreciate that too. Thank you for the love. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.